Hello, good morning again. This video is about really reacting mass calculations, but the most important aspect of it is to use to be able to work out the relative formula mass. Now, reacting mass calculations are the hardest calculations on the Trilogy paper. They are only on the higher tier paper, and they're used to distinguish between the higher grades. So let's look at the method we're going to use to better do reactive mass calculations. So first of all, please, you need to be able to identify the reactant and the product, and you get those from the question. So once you've got that, work out the relative formula mass of the reactant. Then work out the relative formula mass of the product that you have to find. Most important then, you go to the equation to work out how much product will form from the relative formula mass of the reactant. Once you've done that then, you want to find out how much product will be formed from 1 gram of reactant. And finally then, to work out how much mass of product will be formed, you multiply that one, how much will be formed by 1 gram, by the mass you're given in the question. Right, without further ado, let's do one of two examples. So here's the question we've got. Zinc oxide reacts with sulfuric acid to form zinc sulfate and water. And straight away it says, what mass of zinc sulfate? So that's your product that you've got to find. Will be formed from 16.2 grams of zinc oxide. So there's our reactant. So those are the only two things that are involved in. Now, our next step after identifying the reactant products is to work out the relative formula mass of our reactant, zinc oxide. So we can see the relative atomic mass of zinc is 65, oxygen is 16. We add them together, that comes to 81. We now do the same for zinc sulfate. So zinc is 65, sulfur is 32, and we've got 4 lots of oxygens, which will come to 65 plus 32 plus 64, and that will come to 161 grams. Now, the next bit is to go to the equation. As we can see from the equation, zinc got 1 molecule of zinc oxide forms 1 molecule of zinc sulfate. So what that means is the relative formula mass, 81 grams of zinc oxide, will form 161 grams of zinc sulfate. So if we want to find out what 1 gram of zinc oxide will form, we divide that 161 grams by 81. Then, finally, we're using 16.2 grams of zinc oxide. So, the mass we've got will be 160, what 1 gram will form, 161 divided by 18, and times that by 16.2, which, when we work it out in the calculator, will come out as 32.2 grams. So again, let me remind you, from the question, identify the reactant, that's only giving you the mass off here. It's 16.2 grams of zinc oxide. And the product, we've got to find zinc sulfate. Work out the relative formula mass of each and go to the equation to get the ratio of the reactant to product. As it's 1:1, it means that 81 grams of zinc oxide will form 161 grams of zinc sulfate. Then work out what 1 gram will form. And finally then work out how much will be formed by the mass you are using. Now, one more example, slightly harder, just in terms of the equation, but the method is exactly the same. So again, from the question, what mass of copper oxide, so that's our product, will be formed from 6 grams of sodium hydroxide? There's our reactant. So, as before, work out relative formula mass and sodium hydroxide. Notice I'm just using NaOH, not 2NaOH at this stage. So sodium is 23, oxygen is 16, and hydrogen is 1. When you add those together, that comes to 40 grams. Now, do the same next now with the product, copper hydroxide. So, 63.5 plus 2 times 16 plus 2 times 1. And that will come out as 97.5 grams. Now, here we need to go to the equation. Now, if you look at the equation, and the reason I've chosen this is 2 sodium hydroxide goes to 1 of copper hydroxide. So this means that 2 lots of sodium hydroxide, so 80 grams of NaOH, will go to 97.5 grams of copper hydroxide. So work out next 1 gram, what 1 gram of sodium hydroxide will form. So that will be 97.5 divided by 80. And as we are using 6 grams, so 6 grams will form 6 times this, 97.5 divided by 80 times 6, and that will equal 7.3125 grams. Now, remember this, if I've asked you to do it to 3 significant figures, this will come out as 7.31 grams. Now, this method can be used if it gives you the mass of product and asks you how much sodium hydroxide you need to use. You can also, they might ask you how much copper sulfate would react with 6 grams of sodium hydroxide. Is exactly the same method. There's no change. So, enjoy and good luck everybody.